So essentially, either you stop selling any more new products or you start actually losing the market share. You actually have to start at the point where you are actually in a growth phase. And this is typically where your second product line should start thinking about. So if you are, for example, a startup or you're planning to do a startup, one of the things you have to be acutely aware of is before you even go with your MVP or the minimum viable product, you really need to have the second generation product already in mind. And the reason is sometimes this growth, this particular part of the cycle is really, really short. So this is just to talk about incremental innovation. So for example, there is also something which we'll talk about later, which is called as leapfrogging, and also about disruptive innovation. So in case of disruptive innovation, it would not go through these different processes of incremental. What it will do is it will just start with one product, leave a couple of the steps, and actually reach another segment of maturation in terms of technology or in terms of business models. So that would be what is known as a breakthrough innovation. So it can be from technology, it can be from business models, financial models, any of these. So before I get into some cases, just pause over here to take some questions in case there are any.
Any questions, participants? I hope this audio, you all are clearly well audible. Sir, we are good here. You can proceed.
Okay, so because I guess you are all young innovators, you have great ideas in your mind, I would like you to kind of pause and think about something which is called as, I call in my own case as the Zune versus iPods. I'm sure a couple of you might have come across iPods. It's a more younger generation, so you have most of it in your phones. But there was this iPod, which essentially was something for the older generation, which is called as, you could store your music in it, essentially. But there was also a similar product from Microsoft, which was known as Zune, if I remember correctly. Now, what happened is Microsoft had all the things right. It had experience in the IT domain. It had access to hardware. It actually did make, for example, Xbox, these kind of things. But what happened is it launched this product before there were complementary assets. And I mentioned that in the Porter's principles, you need complementary assets to get your business off the ground. And you need technology maturation. So when Microsoft came in, they came in way too early. They were ahead of their times. The platforms were not ready. But in case of iPod, they had a very important ingredient, which is known as digital rights management, where you could actually prevent copying or streaming of the music on unauthorized devices. So essentially, this was very comfortable for the people who were selling the music label companies like Sony, etc. So this is what happened, and that's what an example you have to keep in mind, that you might have a really great idea, but you really need to keep in mind the complementary assets that take your business to the next level. If you don't have that, it could be your supply chain, it could be the manufacturing, or it could be something even very simple like packaging. You could have a great product, you could be making a great food ingredient, but if you don't have the right packaging type for it, or the technology is not right for that kind of things, you cannot scale it, and hence you will not be able to do business. So this is something you really need to keep in mind, that if you're ahead of your time, sometimes your business would fail. That is, if you are way too innovative and other people haven't caught up with you to help you with your market, you could fail the market. The other way around is, you must have heard about the DVD, you must have heard about the Blu-ray, but you might not have heard about the Laserdisc. And this is something that happened, that when we go back to this incremental innovation where people initially had compact discs or tapes, it moved to compact discs, and then it moved to DVDs. There was this laser disc that was doing around. And from the laser disc, what happened was Sony came out with its own, which is Blu-ray, which was actually a little bit inferior to the laser disc, to be honest. But what they did is they put it in all of their machines, their video systems, their gaming systems. And what happened eventually was there were so many people, it's called as a network effect, that there were so many people using this technology, Blu-ray, that people actually migrated from DVD directly to Blu-ray. And this is something which is known as a platform effect. And these are platform technologies where you can set up your technology and it becomes the dominating force, and then other people use it. So now if you go to buy a home theater system, or you go to buy a PC or a laptop, you would not find a laser disk drive, but you would actually find a Blu-ray drive, because that's what most people use. And then because of this technology, a lot of the Hollywood and Bollywood films, they started storing their movies in this particular technology and selling it, and that's how this technology became dominant. So this is also another way of doing business, where you can actually sell your initial technology, which is the Blu-ray, for a lower price. You can put it in all of the machines, sometimes even for free. But later on, you can gain royalty, that every disc that is made, you would get 1 pence or 10 pence out of it. And that adds up to millions when you talk about volume. So this is something, again, where you have innovation that happens, but you change the business model, and you can actually have a lot of network effects that you can tap into. So first one is complementary assets, which you need to have to get your business off the ground and into the market, make money. Second one is the network effects. Now, there is also something which is interesting I wanted to share with you. As I mentioned, everybody has a smartphone right now. This was not the case until quite some time ago. One of the key technologies, enabling technologies, what we call, was data compression and the internet outreach, which in case of India, it's pretty good. Every one of us has gone through the phase where we were first, going to what we called as booths, where people actually had businesses that would have telephones from where you could make state calls. Those were known as STD booths. And then from there, people started having phones in their own homes. And from there, they started having mobile phones. And from there on, everybody actually has a mobile phone, or at least one mobile phone. But sometimes what happens is you have something called as leapfrogging. And this typically happened in the case of Africa, that most of the people did not have access to landline phones, and they directly were interfaced with a mobile phone. And this is known as a technology leapfrogging. So what happens is, you remember these cycles. These cycles are they start at one point where they don't have a phone at all, and they directly jump to a point where they have mobile phones and they don't have access to a landline phone. And this kind of technology leapfrogging is also something you have to keep in mind as an innovator, that these are different methods you can use if you know your market very well. You can actually go to a completely new technology and not follow this cycle. So that is also a breakthrough way of doing it, but it's known as leapfrogging. So just like a frog leaps, it covers a larger distance. It doesn't go step by step. Similarly. So this is technology leapfrogging, and I would leave you with the following message, that you should absolutely know where to play and when. And when I say where to play, you have to be aware of which kind of innovation model you're using. Is it a business innovation, business model innovation, or it's a technological innovation? Because most of the people you would talk, they would say, we are doing patents, we are doing great things, but it falls into a domain where you're just doing an incremental innovation, mix and match of technologies. So when is very important, as we took the case for iPod, that you need to have the complementary technologies that can enable it. So for example, if you're talking about something like remote surgeries in India using a robotic device and VR, you really don't have the bandwidth from the internet service providers to do it. So you really need the technology to mature to that point to release such devices. So that's just an example. There is also something called as an innovation landscape, and I would give this by an example by saying that, let's say, think of your nearest picnic spot, and that is attractive. For some reason, it might be a great garden, it might be a good waterfall, something of that sort. So what happens is people tend to crowd over there, and this is typically happens to most of the beautiful places you want to visit, tourist centers, and ideas are much like that. That innovations, people tend to crowd around certain ideas, organizations tend to crowd around certain ideas. And if you're very aware of what your innovation is, and if it is far away from where people are crowding, you have a better chance of doing business. But you should be aware that you have the enabling technologies as well. You're not the only one doing that kind of technology or business. So that's something you need to do. As I mentioned, incremental innovation is easy, while the architectural one is really tough. So you need to choose your battles wisely, because I've seen more often than not people try to go to platform technologies, like for example, Amazon is a platform technology, Google is, and they all want to do a similar success story. But what you have to remember is architectural innovation requires not only technological advancement, it also needs a business innovation advancement, both put together. So be very careful about which battles you want to choose for your company, for your innovation, for your startup, and keep this in mind while taking ahead and investing in innovation strategies. And it's always, people say, if you're the first, you have a great time, you'll have to go through these pain points where you might not have complementary assets, you might not have the right architecture, people might not even know what you're trying to sell. So this is something that it's not always good to be first or even bad to be last. So if you go back to this particular example, that even if you came in pretty late, even if you didn't have that great a product which was very mature at that time, you can actually, through incremental innovations, you can actually reach a point where your product actually satisfies the mainstream customer. So the initial one, the entrant which was already existing, incumbent, this he or she, as a company, has actually gone through the pain of setting up everything, put a lot of resources into it, and you actually can leverage that acceptance of technology and resources, and you can actually start with something very low end and make yourself innovative as you go up. So you have to remember these kind of things, that it's not always good to be the first or it's bad to be the last. It all depends upon how smart you are on a business level. And from an innovation perspective, this is where I leave you, that try to find your passion, your mission, what the world needs, your vocation, profession, all of this putting together, it's just like a business model, and you innovate and you can find your way around. So at this point, I leave the floor completely open for questions and inputs.
Thank you, sir. Now we will go ahead with the question and answer session. If you have any questions, don't forget to write that in your chat box. We'll take that up.
So Sophia, if you could read out any questions coming in, I'd be happy to answer them.
Sir, Nidhi had asked, what is Zoom? Yes. Leapfrogging. She is asking, what is leapfrogging?
So just to answer leapfrogging, if you looked at this particular model where you had your first product, so let's say that, as I mentioned, I was giving the example of telecommunications where you had landline phones, you had these telegraph points at post offices, and you had STD or PCO booths in the country. And then people started having their own phones, and then it moved on to mobile phones. So this is what typically happened, for example, in India. You had places you had to specifically go to, offices you had to go to make a phone call, or you could book something called as a trunk call. Then people started having phones in their own homes, and then they started having mobile phones. So what happened in the case of Africa is people actually had telegraph and they had some STD PCOs, but they did not end up having landlines in their homes. They directly went to having mobile phones. So this is typically what leapfrogging is all about is one cycle of innovation. So these were multiple cycles. It actually goes ahead without going through one or more of these incremental innovation steps. It directly goes from step 1 to step 3 directly in terms of innovation. This can be technological or business models. Does this answer the question?
Okay. Sir, we have one more question from Divesh.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the crucial business skills for us to start in the first place?
Okay, this is a more generalized question, and what I would do is, knowing that there are different background students who are listening to this, so what kind of business skills you need to know is, first of all, you need to know your customer. That's the first thing you need to know, because what happens is, more often than not, most of the people, they have a great idea and they do it in a reverse fashion. that they find a solution and then they try to find a customer for it, which is a very wrong way to go in terms of business. That let's say you found out a great app that you want to make for, I don't know, for studying. So what you do is you make the app and then you try to find out who would need it. That's a very wrong way of going about from a business point of view. What you need to do is you need to find current, for example, the question would be reversed and said, currently students who are studying, who are in colleges or in schools, what kind of information or what kind of tool would help them? And then you go and design the tool. So that's the first business element that you need to keep in mind, that you need to know your customer, you need to design something for them rather than design something that you like, that is cool technology, that is great, and then trying to find a customer. So that is sometimes it's counterproductive because you have something called as sunken cost, where you have invested so much into the project that you want it to be successful, and then you add more resources, and it gets into a vicious circle where you end up putting in a lot of money and resources, but you don't end up with a business product. So that's the first thing you need to remember. Second is you should absolutely know where to play. And this is what I talked about, that you should be aware who are your competitors, what are they offering, are you in a very crowded market, because for each kind of crowding, you would have a different strategy to get in. And you need to choose your battles. Every time winning is not about, is not what gets you there. It's sometimes also partnering with other businesses, which I talked about as complementary assets. That is something important. So for example, if you take even the biggest names right now, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Reliance, everybody needs to partner with, for example, delivery agents. And these are things that they would like to do. So even big companies do it, they work with other businesses. So you need to remember that you need to find your partners, and you need to have not only business models, but you also need to have the technology to take it there. And please don't be attracted to the fact that you want to be the first or you want to be the best. It's good to have it, but you can also still do great business even if you're not the first, or even actually if you're the last, you could actually have a much better insight. So that's kind of where the business elements come in. It's a deeper question, I can understand, but these are a couple of the key points I would like you to keep in mind from an innovation perspective about businesses and business acumen. Next question, please.
Are there any more questions? Sir, one more question. How startups can raise the funds? And to add, what can be the ways at the very starting stage of the startup? So he's asking how you can raise funds in a very starting stage of any business, and what can be the ways?
Okay, so from a business point of view, we call it the 3 Fs, which are family, friends, and fools. So first, of course, you can ask your family. Well-to-do families can do this. Friends, you can ask your friends to put in some money, and then you have got fools, because anybody who's going in for a new business and they're putting in money, they're taking a certain inherent risk to it. So the first 3 Fs come into play. I would go a little bit beyond that and go into something in terms of details. So first of all, what you need to do, and I'm talking because the talk today is about innovation, what you really need to focus upon is, if you need to get money in, you need to have something as patents. This is primarily the bread and butter of any startup that is there. If you do not have a patent filed, if you do not have a patent that you have done, the chances of you making money is absolutely slim. Now, what I want you to focus upon while I say patents is you also have to be very aware that you yourself don't have to do all of the R&D to do the patents. Most of the companies that made money, for example, I'll give you a very nice example is Siri, which is kind of what the iPhone is identified for, that you have this personal assistant, was actually never ever developed by Apple. It was actually developed at a university here in Switzerland. It's called EPFL. And they actually licensed it to Apple. So what you should think about is, do not invest a lot of your time trying to do this R&D, which is the more deeper part of the innovation part, which takes a lot of time. You should actually talk about, can I go outside and actually find a patent? And here, when you're talking about a patent, you also have to remember this landscape, that you should you can go and pick up and patent from some other company or from some other university in a crowded scenario. This works out very well. And then you could go ahead and you could commercialize that. So having a patent is one of the bread and butters or the lifeblood of most startups. That's the first one. Now, whom can you go to? In case of India, you do have an ecosystem that is set up by the government. I think it comes under innovation movements. I think Atul is one of them. But you also have organizations which do this. You also have venture funds. But for each level, you need to. So the first one is a Series A, which is essentially you already have the prototype and the minimum viable product, and you want to make it a little bit more scalable. You want to, polish the rough edges and so on and so forth. So generally, you can compact this time down if you have a good network and you can take it fast. So this is what almost Series A to B would be about. At about Series C is where your firm is going to take off, and this is where the money quickly moves into millions, and you would need to hire a lot of people. So for this, there are a lot of venture funds. There are also a lot of organizations. I would suggest looking into something called as corporate venture funds, because a lot of corporations have within their organizations people looking externally to buy startups or even invest in startups because they themselves cannot do this. So no matter how big an organization, I just gave the example of Apple, that they went outside and they bought technologies. Even the best technologies, for example, in genetic engineering or anything, did not come from pharma itself. They actually went and brought it from a university. So you can look externally, buy these assets, and if you put a couple of interesting patents together, you could actually make quickly from here, you could move into a radical innovation. So that's another way of getting funds. One of the less known or less looked into resources is family offices. So what happens is a lot of high net worth individuals, which is people who are multi-millionaires, billionaires, they have something called as family offices, which essentially is giving funds to startups. So this could be celebrities, this could be anybody who makes a lot of money. So the reason being that you get a lot of tax incentives if you invest in a startup. So if you have got a really good plan, you could get into these things. But this is more based upon how good you are at networking. But the kind of money you could get is very different. A small point I would like to make here is that at each round of investment, if you talk about your let's say the share in the company, it gets progressively diluted. So this is something before you even go and ask somebody for money, you should know about share dilution and what value you would have at the end of the day. Because most founders start off with owning the company at about 90-95%. And by the time the company actually starts making money at this point of time, which was shown over here, the shares that they own the company actually gets diluted to 5% or even sometimes as less as 1%. So even if the company is making millions, you literally end up with a couple of thousands. So that is something you need to keep in mind while negotiating, while asking for money, because a lot of investments do come in which are known as non-diluting investments, and you should try to target them. I hope this answers the question.
Sir, we have two more questions, and I believe they both are of similar kind. So Divyesh, he's a graduate student. He's asking, is it okay that at this age they can start a startup, or he should wait till the graduation? I think this question is a general question asked by many.
Okay, so Devesh, if I got your name correctly, I like the energy, what you're doing. I like the passion with which you're going ahead. And this is true for all people getting into a startup. It's the new buzzword. Great to do. But what I would do, as I mentioned, is think of yourself as a company. And this is kind of your career path. So what I would like you to think about is go through this particular phase for yourself. So let's say this is your graduation, this is your first job, and this is your startup. Generally, this is what is told, because you finish your graduation, you join a company somewhere, you do an internship. This would follow exactly the same way. you grow a little bit, and then you stop learning at that organization, and then you say, okay, I need to find my next job, or I need to do the startup. But this is how typically people operate. But as I mentioned, there is also leapfrogging, where people start here and they just jump to the next level. So that really depends on the level of confidence you have and how much you actually can risk not knowing this. Because unless you really put your feet in the ground, and you work in a business, you do an internship, or you actually work with a startup, there'll be a million things you will not know. So you would be taking a risk taking this jump. If you land on your feet, great. If you don't, then you might have to come all the way back here and do this. So that's the first advice I would say, is make sure that if you're going to leapfrog, you have every element in place and you have enough experience to do that, or actually you have people who can mentor you for that. That's something really, really important. Finding the right mentor for your startup. So people who invest, and typically investors, they also are great mentors. They would open doors for you. They would enable technologies for you, get you licenses, talk to the right people, these kind of things. So my general advice is, if you are a student, unless you have at least done an internship, or so for example, if your family has been in the same business, or someone close by who can mentor you is ready to spend a lot of time with you, I would avoid going for the leapfrogging at this point of time, unless it's a very, very, I mean, you're really confident about it. I wouldn't hold you back from that. But if you try to do an incremental innovation and you think of yourself as a business, this is what 75 people of percent of the people would do. Another 10%, what they would do is they would actually run the, who are really brilliant and can manage their time a lot, would actually start the startup during their graduation, which is true, and then they would move in. But there are also people who wait for the technology to mature, look at the market, and once you finish your graduation, you have something behind you like a bachelor's or a master's, you can get into the market, which makes you more credible. And then, of course, you have 5% of the people who will make the jump anyway. So it really is down to you, but the more comfortable way to do it is in an incremental fashion. But if you're leapfrogging, make sure that you have the right elements for your business in place. And the couple of things which you cannot do without is finance. If you do not know finance, if you do not know accounting, please do not think of a startup, because no matter which domain you come from, at the end of the day, that's what is going to kill your business, that you didn't have enough funds to survive through, and you did not do proper financial projections or calculations. So that is something that is absolutely necessary. Having some technological insight into the domain you're working always helps. So the short answer is, great if you can leapfrog, but I would advise incremental steps to get into that particular domain as a startup. Any other questions before we run out of time?
There's one more question, and we'll take this as a last question. Very interesting one, though. Ravi, he's a chemical engineering student. Sir, what can I do if I have an idea about and need to implement it, but it also is having some involvement with the government? So, how can I present that idea to the government?
Okay, so first of all, the name was Ravi, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Ravi, first of all, the first rule of innovation, first rule of startup is keep the mouth shut. Which I mean is, if you have an idea, do not share it with anybody unless you have protection from an IP space. Not to me, not to anybody, not even your friends. Because the moment the idea is out there, no matter how good friends or family or anybody is there, they're going to take it. So the first thing you need to do is you need to fortify your position from an IP point of view, which means that you need to get through your first part of your phase, which is over here, a little bit on your own. So if you're a chemical engineer, you could apply for a couple of grants where you could be an independent researcher and come up with which is known as a proof of concept product, a POC. And this you can do it with professors as well from different universities. But what you need to do is you need to have some legal paperwork in place. One is known as the non-disclosure agreement, or the NDA, or a confidential disclosure agreement, or the CDA. You would find templates for this. A good IP lawyer can help you with that. It's spending some money on it, but it's totally worth it. So it might seem very awkward, or it might even sound rude asking people to sign it before you disclose anything. And this is something you really, really need to be aware of, because you could send your great ideas to a lot of brainstorming sessions to great people, and at the end of the day, it might end up somewhere else. So you really need to protect it that way. The second point is, as soon as you can file an IP, you can file a patent, or you can protect it somehow in terms of a trademark or whatever you're doing, whichever is your IP strategy, you're copywriting it, you're trademarking it, you're IPing it, you're filing a patent. Try to do that as soon as possible. Once that is done, then you can go and talk to these organizations, because if you're in a crowded space, as I mentioned, it could get really ugly, and you need to watch out for yourself. So I would suggest first looking into something called as IP strategy before you go and talk to them. Have the basis covered, and from there on, you can talk to anybody and anyone you want under the blue sky. So Ravi, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I think it looks like we have covered all the questions.
Okay.
Sir, is there anything else you want to cover before a wrap up?
No, that's about it, because for me, this was the main part which I wanted to talk about, and we've covered most of it in the given time.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much, Dr. Jay Siddharth, for joining with PP Savani University and giving us this opportunity to host this event, this webinar, and giving us your valuable time. Vishal sir, do you want to add something? Yes, sir, please go ahead, Jay sir.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to PP Savani University students once again. It's been my pleasure, and I thank Vishal for putting me through this, because it kind of gets me back to my basics as well. And thank you very much for moderating this event. It's been a pleasure taking questions, brilliant questions, interesting ones. And I hope that everybody I would see an inventor in every one of them, and a lot of them do business and do good for themselves and for the country and for the world as well.
Thank you, Jay. I know how busy you are, but despite that, you always manage some time for us. And the topic you chose is really good, because what I noticed, like, innovation is the major challenge for all the startups. So I believe that our students has got benefited by your talk. Thank you again, Jay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Vishal, and I wish everybody a great afternoon, evening, and thank you very much. Keep best.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. In case you have missed something, this video